Basically, we're saving the time of you like looking at your code, seeing who the responsible person is, and then searching for like PRs and commits on GitHub and seeing which ones are the ones that are relevant to the context that you're trying to gain. We basically save you the time of doing that. And with this version science, we're also going to save you the time of looking up Jira tickets and basically any other piece of technical information out there.
Hey, this is Brian, and you're listening to JAMstack Radio, a bi-weekly series where we discuss modern web development with maintainers, founders, and developers. JAMstack Radio is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at JAMstack Radio. Welcome to another installment of JAMstack Radio. On the line, we've got actually Esteban from Watermelon Tools. So, Esteban, you want to say hello?
Yes. Hello, Brian. Thank you very much for your time, for inviting me to the show. I am actually a fan of the podcast, so it's pretty fun to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad you reached out to share about what you were working on. Because right after that, I said, hey, let's have you on a podcast. So that way, at least the audience could also share in the sort of vision and what you're working on. Also, I think people might be interested in using the tool you're working on. But before we start, can we just find out who Esteban Vargas is as well? So, like, what's your background? How'd you get here?
I'm a software engineer based out of Latin America in Colombia. I have been developing software for the past 5 years professionally. And very recently, to be precise, 5 months ago, my best friend from college, Esteban Vargas, and I decided to start this company, because we were working as contractors for remote global companies with teammates, us being in Latin America, but with teammates in the US, in Europe, in India. And every time we switched clients, like every 3, 6, or 9 months, it was very hard for us to onboard ourselves to these new code bases every time. And yeah, even having 5, 6 years of experience developing software, we always saw this thing as being something very difficult. And we started Watermelon. We started this company to solve that problem.
Okay, excellent. So what is Watermelon? I'm curious.
Sure. So Watermelon allows developers to understand code context immediately. Right now, we're doing that with an open source VS Code extension that basically allows us to hover over different lines and blocks of code. And we automatically index information from GitHub and provide you the most relevant information from GitHub for that block of code by running git blame on the background, so that you basically save time of switching context between GitHub and the ID. That's how we started. And then our vision is to add more integrations such as Jira, which is the one that we're working on right now, so that you can also get not only the most relevant PRs and the most relevant commit messages, but that you can also get the most relevant tickets.
Okay, excellent. So when you talk about information, I'm hovering over a line of code I see, and I'm like, I don't know where this came from, what's happening. And the tagline on your website is "Go beyond, get blame." So I imagine if you're looking for the story, you're going to find yourself in the commit or the pull request and try to get context that way.
Yeah. Basically, we're saving the time of you looking at your code, git blame by yourself, seeing who the responsible person is, and then with those commit hashes, searching for PRs and commits on GitHub, and seeing which ones are the ones that are relevant to the context that you're trying to gain. We basically save you the time of doing that. And with this version science, we're also going to save you the time of looking up Jira tickets and basically any other piece of technical information out there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. I was had a use case yesterday where I was writing some code on an open source project I have. And we take some contributions from some regular contributors, but also some new contributors that might only do one contribution. And I was touching some code that was recently changed by another contributor. And I was just a little confused on how we got to this point where we had a function that was sort of working, but it was also overly aggressive. And we basically just needed to write some tests around it to see how to basically contain this function and make sure that it's usable other places. And pretty quickly, I saw actually in VS Code, I've got the Git lens, and it just tells me who changed it. So I was able to know, shout out to George. George has been contributing a lot to the open source project. I was able to understand, okay, he's the one that changed it, but I didn't have the context of like what PR that changed, what release that came in, how long ago this was. So I could see where this could be valuable, where if you're touching an old file, if you're touching a new file, like it's getting a lot of changes, at least you don't have to go back into github.com, try to look through these random commit messages, or GitHub does have a nice Git blame feature, but again, that's going to be multiple tabs for you. Sounds like it's pretty useful. So I'm curious, like, how did you mentioned that you and your co-founder were doing contract work for global companies. Like, how did you get to the point where you wanted to solve this problem?
Well, like first of all, like starting companies is very fun and starting a startup is very fun. Like we had actually done it in the past and we know that we actually like wanted to do it again once we had like the right co-founder and the right team.
Yeah.
And, like we just wanted like to let it be. Like we knew that the right problem would just come to us like eventually.
Yeah.
And we definitely found it like doing remote contract work, Yeah, it's very hard for us engineers to become productive immediately on a code base. And that was like the main motivator to want to build this. And I also wanted to mention that you mentioned GitLens. Those guys are great. We actually started like competing against GitLens. We're actually now seeing ourselves more like as a complement for GitLens. And we're starting to show value on other parts of the interface of the VS Code UI. And second, we're starting to show different information and in different ways. So we're now like in a new category of VS Code extension. But yeah, I guess that we're all in the space of wanting to make in the space of like kind of like individual engineering effectiveness.
Okay. Cool. And then you spent some time working on this idea in Accelerator that is based out of Chile, which is Platinus Ventures. Do you want to talk about like how that experience was going to an accelerator?
Yes, absolutely. So the story was that back in late January this year, we were like conceiving like the idea, So it was Miami Hack Week. We flew all the way from Colombia to Miami. It's actually a 3-hour flight. It's not that far away.
Okay.
And, like we had already agreed that we wanted to build a developer tool because we're both developers and we saw like the best founder, like startup fit over there because, we understand the nuances of developers pretty well because we have been doing this for years. And we said, let's go to Miami Hack Week. We'll have like a bunch of developers like physically close to us that can help us like validate whatever idea we conceived there. We went to Miami Hack Week. We conceived like the idea and everything. And while being there, we applied to Platinus Ventures. They replied like super, super rapidly. We had like a bunch of calls super fast. And to our surprise, a week later, we came back to Colombia and we got an offer. $100K for 7%, the post-money safe cap. And yeah, like they're like super helpful. They're kind of like doing like the Y Combinator philosophy adapted to the cultural characteristics of that we Latinos have. So for example, the program runs in Spanish, so it's for Spanish speaking founders.
Yeah.
But they have like a super like techie vocation. Like these guys have like started software agencies, cryptocurrencies, exchanges in Latin America, wealth managers, etc. So like we also had like a lot of software developers working at these companies that also became the early adopters of our product. And yeah, like it was super helpful to get that initial traction and that initial mass of users who are like stick to the product.
Yeah. And I imagine the focus, I'm not sure how long Platinus Ventures has been around, but...
2 years ago.
2 years ago? Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I enjoy seeing like the growth in Latin America for startups and the ecosystem. Obviously, everybody looks at Rappi as the shining success story of startups. And I think famously, I think came from Startup Chile, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it seems like the growth in the ecosystem is definitely needed because obviously not every Latin American country is at the same sort of level as far as footing and economy and stuff like that. And I know Colombia has a very strong tech scene because I've been down there for JSConf Colombia is what it was called. And so I was curious, are you involved in the local community in Bogota or have you made it to Medellin to see the community there?
Absolutely. Actually, I'm from Medellin, my hometown. I'm moving back there in January after so many years living in Bogota because it's...
Okay, congrats.
Because it's, like where I went to college with my co-founder. Colombia is like a country of like a lot of engineers, like a relatively growing English-speaking population that allows us to work remotely for the US and Europe as well. I think we just needed the Rappi phenomenon. Rappi is based out of Bogota, Colombia.
Yeah.
We needed the Rappi phenomenon, like to kind of like make people start companies. And it happened. And yeah, people are starting a bunch of startups now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing to see that too. Cause like we see this in Nigeria with, I think, the payment platform, which it's Paystack, maybe. Yeah. Paystack and Flipkart in India, like these up and coming rapidly growth startups. What usually happens is, and you see that with like the PayPal mafia is what like most people point, the pinnacle point of like where Elon Musk and Peter Thiel came out of. It sort of expands growth into other areas as you see more of that sort of VC funding looking for the next Rappi. And I think there's a lot of excitement. And I personally, I love working with the Colombians. I hablo un poquito español. So I enjoyed going down there and, practicing my high school Spanish as well. But yeah, I honestly, I think I'm bullish on Latin America, and I think that folks should definitely like give it a look for even hiring remote, as you mentioned. So, what sort of companies did you work for prior to Watermelon? Like, what was a problem you were working on before Watermelon?
First of all, gracias. You should definitely come down and look at some talent. Fun story, my co-founder's first job was at Rappi. So you could say that Watermelon is part of this so-called new Rappi mafia.
Yes.
We're kind of like of the newest startups in that mafia, but yeah. But prior to Watermelon, the last company that I contracted for was this company called Cerebrum. Awesome guys, like a 16 company startup distributed globally. Like again, I had like teammates in India, in Brazil, in Germany, in the US. And these guys were building like a blockchain verified credentials for COVID tests and vaccines.
Okay.
So I learned a little bit about that topic over there. It was awesome. And then before that, I was also contracting like for various companies in the US, like in the logistics tech sector.
Okay, very cool. So I wanted to take a step back into Watermelon and try to figure out, like you mentioned Jira. What's the future roadmap? What's next? Are you centralizing all technical knowledge on the platform? What does that look like in like 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, the big, hairy, ambitious goal is that you're just going to hover over a line of code and we're going to provide you the most relevant piece of information, whether it comes from Jira or whether it comes from GitHub or Notion or heck, even like PagerDuty. If you're like a bigger company and observability is like an important thing to you, like we're just going to like provide you the most relevant piece of information so that you can like understand everything about the past of that line or block of code. And now to be very specific, so we have this open source, which is this GitHub with VS Code integration, which is a free like open source product. And now we're developing our closed source, which we're going to use like to leverage our open core business model. And in that closed source, we're going to develop a series of dedicated endpoints, starting with the Jira ones that I'm mentioning, so that you can basically get this relevant information from Jira without having to leave the IDE. And saving this context switch for developers is what we believe that will save like companies like years of productivity at scale once we do it like with various companies, because the context switch for developers is very expensive.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. And I'm curious, VS Code. VS Code is something that I spend almost no time paying attention to up until the last couple of years. And it's surprising on how useful the platform is. And even for like your product, which I understand is an extension today, but what a great place to sort of incubate your idea and your tool as an extension, knowing that off the top of your head, do you know how many users of VS Code there are? Like it's got to be millions.
Yeah, I believe I saw somewhere there are 10 million monthly active users. That's
amazing. That's what a that market, the TAM slide on your pitch deck is got to be amazing. So
exactly, I believe it's 21 million like who have downloaded it, but 10 million are like monthly active.
Wow, that's even more amazing.
And regarding the TAM slide, we are 27 million developers like developing software professionally in the world. And we're going to be something like 50 something million by the end of the decade. So yeah, it's ever growing.
Yeah. Absolutely fascinating. Yeah, cool. Well, last question. It's like, how can folks get started with this? Like, where do we go? How do you sign up?
All you gotta do is search Watermelon on the VS Code like marketplace search bar that's inside the IDE.
Yeah, I imagine that's a unique word that not a lot of Watermelon tools in the VS Code extensions.
Absolutely. There's like a watermelon color theme or something, but yeah, like you'll recognize us because we have like that smiley like watermelon logo. That's like very shiny. It's worked very great for us. And yeah, like you can just do that and get started.
Perfect.
It works both for private and public repos, and yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Honestly, I might go ahead and install that today, and maybe I can get unblocked. And because at the moment, I don't actually jump in the code as often as I want to or I used to. So as things change around me in between my PRs, definitely very helpful to understand the context of the code I'm changing around me. So very cool. So folks, definitely check out Watermelon tools. I do want to transition us to picks. So these are things that we're jamming on. Could be music, could be food related, technology related. If you don't mind, I'll actually go first. And I have a pick, and it's a quick technology pick, and it's called Dashybase. Dashybase is it's sort of a layer that you could put on top of your Supabase database. So Supabase has been on the podcast previous episode. I don't have it on top of my head. But what I'm getting at, Supabase is an open source Firebase alternative. It's built on top of Postgres instead of like a NoSQL experience. And with Dashybase, what they've done is they put a layer on top of your Supabase instance to then build an admin dashboard pretty quickly. So I have one non-technical person on my team who may or may not need to edit context and data. Currently, what we're actually working with is we need to identify the most popular repos on the open source platform. And to do that, we actually have a static table basically to add repo IDs to say this one's popular. We want to automate that in the future, but for now, before we develop that algorithm to identify the most popular ones, we've just been manually choosing them based on what we've known. And that experience can now be applied to Dashybase, where anybody on the team can interact with the database, specifically just specific tables that we don't have to unlock to everybody else. Like, we don't have any personal information inside the platform, but if we did, we can now limit it to only access to this table based on this login. And it saves us some time, because building internal tools for just your team to work with, it's either going to be like a really underwhelming experience because you just do it like no design, just enough to like make it work, or you can sign up for Dashybase and it gives you a nice, beautiful, I'm not sure if it's tail end, but a beautiful UI to basically interact with your tables. So definitely check it out. It's Dashybase. We'll probably have them on the podcast sometime in the future because I'm enjoying the experience so far. Esteban, do you have any picks for us?
It doesn't have to be developer tool related.
No. Let us know about something local in Bogota. So when people do visit, they can seek it out.
Oh, I actually have a pick. If you are saying like for a longer or medium term stay, I recommend something called Todos Comemos. It's basically like pre-prepared groceries that are healthy, delicious, and like relatively cheap. They get delivered to your home like very fast, very conveniently. And it's healthy and it saves you like cooking time. So if you come to Colombia, definitely look at Todos Comemos.
Say that again, Dos Comemos?
Yeah, Todos Comemos, yeah.
What's the English translation for that?
Like, we all eat.
We all eat. Okay. I was getting there, but yeah. Comemos. Yes. Well, perfect. Well, I'll definitely check out Dos Comemos when I'm down in Colombia. I personally love the country. Great experience. I only spent time in Medellin, but would love to explore more of the country. To be quite honest, every time I go to a Spanish-speaking country, I get better at my Espanol. So it gives me more confidence every time I walk into Colombia and other countries. So I'll definitely I'll hit you up next time I'm down there. And for this, I appreciate you coming on talking about Watermelon tools. Folks, check it out.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Brian.
And keep spreading the jam. That's all we have time for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at JAMstack Radio. This show is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com.